Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Vedya Ravinam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Matrarupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. So Mark, do you remember where we are?
We're on number 1516 on page 401.
I think it's going to get chilly. Can I ask you to pull the cord once? That's fine. Okay. Ganesh, will you chant for us this evening?
Yeah, I can chant.
Do you have your book handy?
Yeah, let me just go grab it, Jim. It'll take me a second.
Okay.
Okay. What's the verse, Mark?
It's 15-16 on page 401.
And we've now started, I think it's the 21st chapter, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Evam nirupanadhyaistu samaveshe dridhe sati shivatamapya tachittam harshe dvigavivarjitam yatra yatra prajatita sarvam tachvisat Tachivasa krama तच्छिवसा कृतं करोत्युत्तमविज्ञानी जीवन mukta padasthitah. Thus, when the permeation by the self has become firm by means of ascertainment or investigation leading to firm abidance in the self, and other means, his mind attaining to the nature of Shiva and destitute of delight or grief wherever it goes, makes all that
Destitute of what?
destitute of delight or grief
All right.
wherever it goes, makes all that or all the knowable objects identical in nature with Shiva. That foremost knower of the self is established in a state where he is liberated while living. Note, though the mind may alight on objects, it does not abandon its Shiva nature. That is, continues to shine as pure consciousness.
Yes. So once you see who you are, you don't lose it. It's not dependent on a mind state. When are you ever not you? And when you have rediscovered Aham Brahmasmi, I'm that ground of being, I'm Chidakasha, I'm the space of consciousness, Chidananda Rupam, I'm the form of bliss consciousness itself. And when the mind has given up its fascination for the world of name and form, then as Shankara says, that person who's a full knower of the Supreme, who has retired into the Supreme. Then even though objects are perceived, it does not cause the mind to extrovert with longing or aversion. This is the best among knowers. This is Jivan Mukta, the person who is liberated while alive. And he says, this person sees all the phenomenal objects as Shiva, as consciousness itself. The names and forms are just the shape. All ornaments are nothing but gold. All vessels are nothing but clay. All ice cubes are nothing but water. All the names and forms are nothing but nothing. Just the play of consciousness. This is the best of the knowers of the wise ones. Any thoughts on this? And again, borrowing this paradigm from Yoga Vasishtha. Yoga Vasishtha, there's 3 questions that we're dealing with. Who am I? Oham. What is this world? And how has it come about? Who am I? I am the ground of being. I am witnessing consciousness. What is this world? Just the play, the divine Leela of name and form. There's no solid, concrete world out there separate from me. The world has no inherent joy-giving or misery-producing qualities. It is my mind that is attributed that to. You go to the dream state. You have an imagination, you visualize the elephant. Elephant's just a fancy, it's just an imagination. But if you dream about an elephant, the precondition, the avarana shakti, the veiling powers, I fell asleep. Non-apprehension of myself as the waker. Then when the mind projects the imagination of the elephant, I think it's real. This world is no different. We fall asleep spiritually. Then I think I'm the ego. I have jiva bhavana, the deeply rooted attitude or conviction that I'm an individual, I'm a person. World of name and form seems separate from consciousness, separate from me. My feelings, my reactions are caused by the forms. It's actually the other way around. It's my deeply rooted, largely unconscious belief system, which is causing my experience of the world. Next verse.
Tasmat subhakti yogenyebhyo. Tasmat subhakti yogena anyebhyo bhuyo nirupanam sreshtham sadhaname tattu nanyate tatsamam bhavet bhaktya nirupana samam na bhavet anya sadhanam. Therefore, along with the employment of devotion as the means, ascertaining it repeatedly for others, this is the best means. Another cannot be equal to this. Another means cannot be equal to ascertainment coupled with devotion. Note, exclusive devotion itself leads to inwardness, resulting in investigation of the self, shining always as self-awareness, which culminates in self-knowledge.
Yes. And did he say ascertaining this for others or to others?
Ascertaining it repeatedly for others, yeah.
Yes. So what he's riffing on is this wonderful refrain that we get at the end of Taittiriya Upanishad. Swadhyaya pravachane-cha, swadhyaya pravachane-cha, meaning our own intense study, reflection on the deep meaning of Scripture, the teaching given to us by the Guru. Then pravachana, teach others. Why? Because it helps to root the knowledge in our own minds. Now, Vedanta is not an evangelical tradition. We're not suggesting that you stand on street corners and chant Hare Krishna and bang on the Vedas. You leave that to other traditions. But if you come across another fellow traveler, share it. Never claim a state that isn't yours, that will sabotage your own sadhana. But what you can do, take the posture of being what we call a dharma holder. Well, this is what the scriptures say. This is what my teacher said. Be a messenger. Just hand people the tools. All of us can do that. Don't get into spiritual data wars with people flaming on YouTube or Facebook. That's not what we mean. We mean that when you come across another person, share. Someone once asked Ram Dass, why are we here? This was towards the end of his life. He had a marvelous answer. He said, to walk one another home. I just love that. That's what we're here to do. All right, next one.
Jnaninam lakshanam Rama durvignyayam bhavet khalu yata sarvantaram tattu netra pagadya gocharam anirupayitum shakyam lakshitam paparai kvachit. Rama, the characteristic of sages possessed of knowledge would surely be difficult to be known, since it is the innermost of all and beyond the cognizance of the eye, the speech, and the rest of the sense organs. It cannot be ascertained or known by others anywhere.
So we have this saying, only one person of wisdom can recognize another. We get fooled if they have a 5-syllable unpronounceable name. They have a long beard. They're wearing white robes or saffron robes. None of that is a test. But if you have the sensitivity to be able to drop your own mind, tune to another, you can tell. Oh, that person, I love the term the Sufis use, that person has the taste. They can revel in their own self-nature. But our scriptures will give us the marks of the person of steady wisdom. This is not for us to test other people. It's pointless. So-and-so enlightened. So-and-so realized. Are they fully realized? Are they completely fully realized? You cannot go by what's popular or what other people say. So we have these sections in our scriptures for us to measure our own steady wisdom. And even before realization dawns on the mind, these marks of the person of wisdom, which they experience spontaneously, you and I can take it on as a practice. So let's see what the scripture says. Going on.
Yatha shastrajnata loke panyairna nyayate kvachit dehavastra bhushanadihi avamanyairna vedyate. As the knowledge of the scriptures is not known by others in the world anywhere by means of the body, clothes, ornaments, and the like, thus self-knowledge is not recognized by others.
So it isn't about what you wear, what scriptures you can quote, what ornaments you have. Others cannot know it. And when it comes to you and me, do not try to be spiritual with external symbols of it. That will only feed your spiritual ego. I mean, you wear what's appropriate to your station in life. It's an inside job. Next one.
Vidvattahi sasamvittim. Vidvattahi sasamvitti matravedyana yatha samsvaditarasa rasajñatvam hi bhargava. Bhargava, the state of possessing knowledge is knowable only by one's own recognition, not otherwise, as is indeed the knowledge of the taste of the one who has relished the taste. Note, a person who has tasted honey can alone recognize its taste. Others who have not tasted it cannot know that taste relished by the former. So it is with knowledge.
So the essence of the shloka is this: self-realization is absolutely self-validating. It swallows all doubt. So if you need to go to the teacher and say, I want an enlightenment certificate, you're a fool. Likewise, the Buddha himself could come up to you and say, oh, no, you don't know. Thank you for sharing your opinion. You either know who you are or you don't. The closest I can come to it, it's like a 7 or 8-year-old who's taking a sex education class in school. And they come home and ask their parent, will I know it when I have an orgasm? Well, how will I know that I didn't break something? Or how will I know, is it like this? Is it like that? Is it like this? And the parent says, don't worry. You don't need to read the book. Nature will take care of itself. And when it happens, mark of real wisdom, real self-realization is that it swallows all doubt, not about this world, but about yourself. This world continues to be a mystery. Self, God, ultimate reality, you can know absolutely and without doubt. So that's the person whose state of knowledge you need to be concerned about, not others, but your own. Oh, Jim, how will I know if my guru's enlightened? You won't. When you find out who you are, then you'll know who the guru is. Oh, I think so-and-so realized. No way of knowing if you yourself are not a person of wisdom. And if you are, other people's mind states don't make any difference. I think I've shared this with you. Back in the 70s, when I was in the ashram, one of the stupid ideas that was running around is who was realized and who was fully realized. Well, Swamiji, oh, he's realized, but Baba Muktananda is fully realized. And then Guru Bawa, great Sufi mystic, came. Oh, yeah, but Guru Bawa is completely fully realized. Like all these people were interested in having orders. You know, my guru's more powerful than your guru. Nonsense. Does nothing to free us. If the student's mind is ready, a rock will enlighten you. If the student's mind is not ready, Lord Shiva himself could appear. Any thoughts on this? Going on.
Tathapi Chaturair Vidya Vadbhistad Bhashanadivihi Vedyate Hiyatha Swasya Marga Sukshmapi Pilikaihi. Even then, it is indeed recognized by clever people possessed of knowledge. Through his speech and the like as their own path is recognized by small ants. Note, the characteristic of a knower of the self is known only to another knower of the self, as the path of the ants is known only to themselves.
Yes. Not a whole lot more to say about it. Next verse.
Santi Stulala Lakshani Tvanekantani Tani Tu Sukshma Lakshmani Chanyani Durvigneyani Peparaihi. There are gross characteristics for a knower of the self, like tranquility, but they are not exclusive, since others might also possess the same. The other subtle characteristics are difficult to be known by others.
Yes. So, we have these things about a person whose mind is the same in pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor, who has no doubts, who's, the whole last, 18 verses at the end of chapter 2 of Gita. But there are people who could be good people. They have very positive spiritual sanskaras. They're nice. But that doesn't indicate that they're men or women of wisdom. Knowers of Brahman. It's too subtle. Going on.
Nirupanam bhashanam cha sadhana bhinayastatha jnaninamiva chanyaistu kartum shakyo hi lakshyate. It is indeed observed that ascertainment intellectually, speech and exhibition of the means can be done even by others like those of the knowers of the self.
So there are many teachers out here there who have knowledge of the scriptures and can get us started on the path, can give us authentic instruction, absolutely wonderful. But that in and of itself is not a sign that they are Jews. Going on.
Anirmalanta karanaihi abhyastam jnana sadhanam sthiri bhavati yattesham lakshanam tat prakirtitam. That means of knowledge practiced by those with an impure mind, which becomes firm in them, is declared as the characteristic. Note, these cannot constitute the subtle characteristics referred to in verse 23.
So you can be a vulgar person and do lots of practice and become a good person. Thank God. But that's not necessarily being a man of wisdom. Going on.
Yasya manava manau cha labha labhau jaya jayau neshadvesheshitum shaktau vidyartam jnanishuttamam. For whom respect and disrespect, gain and loss, and victory and defeat are not able to be distinguished in their perception, even a little, one should know them as the best among the knowers of the self.
So the one thing we can look at in our own minds that's an indication of the steadiness of our wisdom is if we have this sama drishta, this equality of vision. Physical things, gain and loss, pleasure and suffering, honor and dishonor, success and failure, all of it just is the same. Why? Because the man of wisdom sees the fundamental illusory nature of name. Doesn't take it seriously. Just a movie. Next verse.
स्वात्मानुभव वार्तासु पृष्टो गूढ़ार्थमप्युत असंदिग्ध प्रतिवदेत् झटिति ज्ञानिषुत्तमः. The best among the knowers of the self, asked about even hidden meanings in reports on the experience of the self, can answer at once without being doubtful.
Yes. So a person of wisdom, when asked about the nature of the self, can answer with no preparation and clearly. Let me see if I can illustrate why. So, Puneet, if someone were to come to you from outer space and I read a book about human beings, and in the book it says they have 3 heads and 4 arms. Do human beings have 3 heads and 4 arms? No. How do you know that?
By experience.
You're a human being. Yes. There's no effort. You didn't even have to take an anatomy class. So also, a man of wisdom need only refer to his own direct experience. He has become a Upanishad. And what we find when we find a man of wisdom like that is all those complicated teachings that we may have read in all the books, commentaries, and things like that that seem so confusing. The man of wisdom can make them all so clear and so obvious because he talks from his own direct experience. The other thing, Sadguru, the real teacher of truth, when you are working with him, he doesn't leave you thinking, oh, Guruji, you're so great. He leaves you as you have had a taste of the experience of your own self. That's the mark of a real good teacher. Going on.
यस्योत्साहो भवेत् ज्ञान वार्तास्त्वतितरां किल निरूपणे ह्यवै मुख्यं ज्ञानिनो लक्षणं हि तत्. That indeed is the characteristic of a knower of the self, to whom there would certainly be happiness exceedingly on hearing reports relating to knowledge and absence of aversion in its investigation.
Yes. So, to a man of wisdom, a fit student is an object of desire. His greatest worldly joy is watching another human being blossom into that knowledge. So the student can see the way the teacher sees. Teacher, in some ways, is a spiritual midwife. Midwife doesn't bring the baby out. Mommy does that. But she helps. So also, we do our own spiritual work. Teacher can help. But if it's successful, there's the birth of wisdom. Oh, that's a great joy. That's a great joy. Next one.
अनारंभ स्वभावेन संतोष शुचिचित्तिता अनारंभ स्वभावेन संतोष शुचिचित्तता महापत् स्वपि शान्तात्मा सभवे ज्ञानिषु उत्तमः. He would be the best among knowers of the self, who has a tranquil mind, even in great calamities, has no undertaking arising out of innate disposition, and has contentment and purity of mind.
So this santosha, this deep contentment, his mind is at peace with what is. And he no longer has any ego-prompted desire or undertaking. This is when you and I say, oh, I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, I gotta have this going on. This is my new project. If I don't succeed at this business venture, I'm calamity, the stock market's crashing, all that stuff gone. He acts in the world, impelled by the force of his past and the desires of other people. That yearning inside is blown. Next one.
एतद् आदीनि लक्ष्माणि भार्गवोत्तम ज्ञानिनां स्वात्मनस्तु परीक्षायां सुस्थिराणि न संशयः. Bhargava, these and other characteristics, the foremost knowers of the self, are stable in the examination of oneself by a knower of the self. There is no doubt in this matter. Note, the idea is that such characteristics may be ascribed to others rightly or wrongly, but cannot be mistaken in self-examination.
Yes. So it is for us to know about the state of our own mind, whether we are Sthita Prajna Purusha, people of steady. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Sadhakastu sada swatma pariksha tatparo bhavet yatha parikshane nyasya nipuna sampravartate tatha parikshan swatmanam siddhimna kathamapnuyat. One who practices the means of self-knowledge should always be closely intent on the examination of their own mind, as they, being clever, proceed in the examination of others. Examining themselves in that manner, how can they fail to attain the accomplishment that is liberation?
Yes. So the import is, it is dubious to examine the mind states of others. Although, as you get emptier and emptier, and you're more familiar with your own kleshas, when someone's got a syndrome going on, it becomes pretty clear what's happening.
Jim, did you say syndrome?
Well, some agenda that they're running. Let me see if I can give you an
Oh,
example. I have a fellow with whom I'm working, and he's been clean and sober 13, 14 years, something like that. And he used to be special forces in the Army, and then he got addicted to drugs and alcohol, and he robbed a bunch of banks and did 6 years in prison. And when we're out to lunch with other friends, he always talks about his Army history or his prison history. Those are the only two subjects he talks about. So he's not aware that this narrative is part of his identity. So if you're a meditator and your mind is quiet, you can, oh, look, that's his narrative.
got it.
Because we're working together, my suggestion is, you might want to watch that narrative. Is that who you really are? Which is something much deeper. You're a child of God. You're not a convict. I mean, that's something that happened to you, but not now. That's not who you are. And then why do I tell the stories? Well, they attract attention. I can tell all these war stories about what's going on, and I become the center of attention in conversation. Okay, do you always need to be the center of attention? This is what I mean by we're able frequently just to see what's going on with other people. And that doesn't mean it's our job to bust their egos. We leave that to whoever they have empowered in their life. But we can have compassion, but we can also see. Does that make it clearer, Uday?
Oh, yes, very much. I understand.
But the import of the verse is the person whose narrative, whose kleshas, whose afflictions we need to be most attentive to ourselves.
In fact, I
Now,
feel that
go ahead.
I feel that I notice in myself that I notice what you call the agendas of various people, and in earlier times my instinct would be to pass a comment or something sarcastic, but as over the years I've realized that, man, if this is what I'm sensing in them, I must be much worse, so I better watch myself with my own agenda and narrative.
It may not be worse, but obviously there's an old slogan that I like: you spot it, you got it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Or if you point your finger at someone, there's 3 more pointing back here. But what we ultimately want to come to is have this immense compassion for the human condition.
Right.
You watch yourself acting out a habitual thing, something character defect in conversation or in your interactions. And you know, you may have had the same character defect for decades and been working on it for decades. It still pops up. So it becomes an old friend. You try not to hurt other people.
Yeah.
But you have to have immense compassion for your own mind as well as others. Did that make sense?
Oh, yes. Yes, Jim. Thank you.
The Buddhists call that being shot by the second arrow.
Oh,
You make a mistake in life and you're struck by the arrow of your suffering. Then if your mind comes in and says, oh, how could I have done that? I'm such a crappy yogi. I mean, that was such horrible behavior on my part. Then you get shot by the second arrow. Try to keep it to one arrow. You know? Very, very good question. But mind is just mind. One of the things we find as we get deeper in this work, you can't even really find a thing called my mind in your mind.
yeah.
Where does my mind stop and other people's thoughts and feelings that influence atmospheres start? It just becomes mind after a while. I am none of it. I just witness it. Maybe do a little bit of what I can to alleviate the suffering. It's interesting. Probably in our spiritual literature, the greatest healer we have historically is the Master Jesus. Did so many miracles, raised people from the dead, fed the multitudes, walked on water. Well, there were still lots of people that he couldn't get to. Suffering is with us. Suffering is with us. We can only do what we can. All right, next verse.
Yadanya gunadoshanam vicharana tatparah sviyanam gunadoshanam vichara paramo bhavet tada sarva sadhananam prapya siddhimupaishyati. When one who is not closely intent on investigating the virtues and defects of others can become solely engaged in the investigation of his own virtues and defects, then he will attain to accomplishment by the acquisition of all the means of liberation.
Yes. So it's not our job to do other people's yoga. Some of us have the dosha, the defect, that we give advice compulsively. Always got a solution to someone else's problem. If you find that you have that particular affliction, that klesha, here is a practice. See if you can go for a week without giving anyone advice unless they ask for it. Now, if you're like me, the very humbling conclusion is nobody cares what I think. Are not necessary to run the world and fix other people's lives. But what if someone comes to me and they're suffering and they tell me about it? That doesn't necessarily mean it's your job to fix them. Actually, what most people need is to just be heard. For you and me to hold compassionate, sacred space. And it's great practice for us not to believe their minds. And you stay inside, none of my thinking is real, but none of this person's thinking is real either. It's really here. Just hold sacred space. See what happens. Next one.
एवं प्रोक्तानि लक्ष्माणि ज्ञानिनां भृगुनन्दनः स्वात्मन् अस्तु परीक्षायाम् उपयुक्तानि सर्वथा. Descendant of Bhrigu, the characteristics of sages possessed of knowledge thus described are exceedingly useful in the examination of one's own mind.
Yes. So, as I say frequently, quoting Hamlet, assume a virtue if you have it not. So for the man of wisdom, these characteristics are spontaneous. For the rest of us, we work at it. We work at it. But that's why the scriptures give us these marks of the person of steady wisdom. And many, many scriptures. Any thoughts about this? Next verse.
Anyesham tu parikshayam anekantanya Anyesham tu parikshayam anekantanya munitu yato ye jnanino kyanta shuddhasvanta prigudvaha tesham apatasam siddha sadhanai siddhirasthita. Bhargava, but they are variable in the examination of others, because for those sages possessed of knowledge who have extremely pure minds, accomplishment has been reached by means achieved at the moment or immediately.
So, the result of steady wisdom is these characteristics spontaneously. And when one man of wisdom meets another, he's not at all concerned about their apparent behavior. Means nothing. Can this person revel in the sun? for you and me. Don't worry about other people. Do our own yoga. Next verse.
Atah purva vasanano. Atah purva vasananurodha vyapara. Atah purva vasana anurodha vyapara tatparaha katham parikshaniyaste samanya vyavaharinah jnaninastu tatpariksham kuryurabhya kuryurabhyasa vaibhavat apat darshanadeva yatha ratna parikshakaah. Therefore, how are they who are exclusively devoted to actions in conformity with their former mental impressions and are possessed of ordinary actions to be examined? But sages possessed of knowledge can make their examination on account of the greatness of their practice of knowledge, as the examiners of gems can do merely at sight or by seeing for a moment.
So, different men or women of wisdom may behave in the world in various ways. That is not the test of their knowledge. It's something much subtler. Much, much subtler. And again, the point of this whole section is focus on our own yoga. Next verse.
Manda jnanavatam deha samstha mudha samaivahi yatona tesham sahaja samadhi praptirastihi. For those possessed of slight knowledge, that is, those who are lowest in the scale of jnanins or knowers of the self, the settled mode of life in the body is indeed similar to ignorant people, since they do not have the attainment of sahaja samadhi, or natural and constant absorption in the self.
Yes. So, though the lowest order of jnanis that we've talked about in previous verses, previous chapters, they look like ordinary people in the world. We look at them, they may get angry, they may be annoyed, they may express desires, aversions. We can get confused. Those of deeper wisdom, because of the result of previous punya, who have sahaja samadhi, which means natural or continuous. Minds do not extrovert. Minds do not extrovert, even though we see them engaged in the work. Savikalpa samadhi, we're tuning up the mind. We're on the doorway to the infinite. Still the perception of the world. With practice, it matures into nirvikalpa samadhi. The world is gone, the individuality is gone. The mind returns from that, it's permanently conditioned. Oh, I'm not a person. I never was. the highest state, sahaja samadhi, when that man of perfect wisdom not only knows himself as that partless Brahman, but knows this world is nothing, and the mind no longer extroverts. Next verse.
Yavat vimarshana Tavatte Purnarupinah Yada Vichara Vimukha Tada Dehamayatpatah Sukha Dukkha Jushotyantam Pashutulyataya Sthitah. As long as they are solely engaged in investigation resulting in absorption in the self, so long they are of the nature of the whole, that is undivided consciousness. When they are turned away from such investigation, then on account of identification with the body, they exist with similarity to animals undergoing happiness and sorrow very much.
So this is what I call the yo-yo state. Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. So I have intermittent knowledge of myself. When I'm directly engaged in self-inquiry, I get it. But then ignorance covers the mind, and when I'm out there in the world, I forget, and I'm a person. And he says, you're not a whole lot different than an animal. Meaning you suffer just like an ordinary ignorant person. What's the antidote to this? The antidote, according to Shankara, is in Viveka-Chudamani, verse 267, which is one of my favorites, where he says, even after realization of the truth, there exists a strong impression that one is the doer and the enjoyer, which is the cause for rebirth. So even after you've had glimpses of it, this karta and bhokta, the sense of being a person, strong impression is still there. And when he says it's the cause for rebirth, what that means is I get re-identified. And Shankara says this needs to be conscientiously rooted out. Steady and continuous identification with the self. It is the annihilation of the vasanas. What's the essence of a vasana? My ignorance. Here and now. That's considered steady wisdom, considered liberation. Any thoughts on this? Next verse. Nope, we'll stop here. What verse have we stopped on?
41, 42.
41, 42 next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jim.